Please join us in welcoming Olivia, Mike, and Jordan to the stage.
These three? Cool.
All right, perfect.
Hello, hello, hello. Can you guys hear me? Great. Nobody said yes. Yes?
Yes, I can hear.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today and for coming to VapiCon generally. It's crazy we have so many people here. But yeah, we have an amazing panel today with two friends of mine from the past couple of years. We're going to be looking at voice AI, how it got to this point. Both Olivia and Mike have seen voice AI from the very beginning. Olivia was one of the first to actually map out the voice AI landscape in her state of voice AI, followed by the one the year after. And she met with our company very early on, back in 2023 or early 24, and also met with many other startups, and then put us on a map. And it was like, oh, wow, okay, it's a market, got it. And then, and so, yeah, really awesome to have you here since you've seen it from the start. Mike is our board member, our investor. He's the one who made the big bet on Vapi, and we're just thrilled to have him as well. He's seen it as well. So Olivia has the perspective from the consumer side. Mike has a perspective from the enterprise side, so we kind of have a nice set of eyes. But yeah, so to kick things off, the purpose of this panel is to see how voice becomes a core interface in the enterprise, how that spills into consumer life, and by the end, we'd like to have a realistic map of what voice looks like in 5 to 10 years. So we're going to pressure test this question with two investors who have been watching it from day one. And let's start by setting the context, see what's changed. So what, in your opinions, from what you've seen, has been the biggest unlock that's brought voice to the point where it is today? Because it moves so fast in the past 2 years. Why do you both think that is? I'll start with you, Olivia.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I published my first voice report in early 2024, possibly, and it felt like I was too early. Like it kind of landed with a little bit of a thud because it wasn't really a market yet, because I think the models and the applications weren't quite there yet. And so I think a couple big things happened between then and then like 6 months later and now into 2025 and beyond. I would say the first big challenge that we had to solve was latency. Like the earliest voice AI pitches I took would be, and rightfully so, like really excited about 2 to 3 second latency or something. And now we're down to like, 200 milliseconds, maybe. Yeah. Sometimes even faster in some cases, which is super exciting. So I think that was a big one. And then I think the second one that's maybe underestimated a little bit is the humanness of the voices. Because if you have great latency, but it still sounds somewhat robotic and it doesn't respond in an emotionally appropriate way, then it's difficult to really have a wide range of use cases utilizing AI voice. And so I think as those two things have improved at the model layer and then at the application layer, we've seen a lot more builders be able to add voice into their products.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think particularly the latency one is one we've all been following, and just like, I don't think anyone's trying to deceive the end customers into thinking they're talking to a human, but you had to get to a point where it felt snappy enough that the end consumer thought they were dealing with an intelligent counterpart. So we cleared that threshold. And then I think the other one, particularly for a lot of the B2B use cases, was being able to have tool calling that actually worked, so you could connect these agents to your core systems of record to actually take helpful action versus just having an agent you could talk to but not actually help you with anything. So.
Yeah, and then this is why I think we saw consumer, at least in the early days, had a ton of adoption, but you couldn't actually make any money doing it. Like throwback to AI girlfriends when that was like a thing. It was like, I'm going to tell a little story. So I was trying to find product market fit for Vapi really early on, and I couldn't find anyone who wanted to buy it, so I was literally on these like AI girlfriend discords, like trying to find someone who would pay for my product. Luckily, we found customer service, and that's a bit better of an industry. But yeah, in the early days, it was very weird, very, very murky. So I guess like from your perspectives, how has the layers of the stack evolved since when you started looking into the space a couple of years ago, Mike?
Yeah, I think I started looking at this early 2024 too, and we were building this thesis, and as part of that, we were trying to talk to lots of companies that were building real voice agents, and I just had a hard time at finding anyone building voice agents that wasn't like a voice-specific company. Like our whole mission is to build something in and around voice. And I think the big change from then until now is just all of the, obviously like the models have all gotten better, but all of the developer tooling. I mean, this is a shameless plug for Vapi. But aside from that, like developer platform layers and orchestration layers, we've got better evals, better low latency hosting providers. Like all of that stuff has just come such a long way that now you don't have to just be a voice company to build sophisticated voice agents. And I think that's what we're seeing over the last, even 9 months, is the fact that you've got all this tooling, so you guys don't have to reinvent the wheel from the bottom up to actually enable people to build really compelling customer experience.
Yeah, it used to take like an entire team of like Google engineers just to get anything.
Totally.
Now we have something.
Yeah. It's interesting how almost like every layer of the voice stack has gotten better and continues to get better. Like better text to speech, speech to text, like better kind of intermediary models, better LLMs where you can now tool call during a voice AI interaction. And I think that's also been really key because it's kind of like you're bottlenecked by the worst part of the stack. And so the fact that the whole stack has gotten better, and then of course there's companies like Vapi that help you bring it all together in one place, has been, I think, really crucial to voice AI continuing to just explode in both enterprise and consumer use cases.
Yeah. So over 2024, we called it like the Cambrian explosion of voice AI. I'm curious, like, was there a specific moment for each of you that stood out, or maybe a period of time that was like, okay, something extremely interesting is happening here. It's not just a hype wave. Yeah, what? And I can share.
For me, I would say this sounds like such an obvious one, but the first time I used advanced voice mode and I was like, whoa, I can interrupt this thing. And I don't have to like yell at it to stop talking and then let me talk versus like what we were all used to with AI and the phone in the past. Like that was really special and exciting, I think, on the consumer side. Hearing like the different quality of voices that were coming out from companies like 11 and Cartesia and understanding how a really great voice placed in the right context could evoke like real human emotions in me, similar to having a conversation with another human, was really special. Yeah. On the B2B side, I think realizing, at least for me, how much of business runs on the phone, both for SMBs and enterprises. And even for me, like here in San Francisco, calling like a restaurant and realizing that I was talking to a voice agent because it was after hours for them and I was trying to make a reservation. I was like, okay, wow. If like small businesses in SF are adopting this now, this means that like this is really starting to happen.
Yeah, I think similarly, maybe one of my first sparks was I met one of the first companies that was building these voice agents for home services companies, which is another business where like all their business comes in over the phone and they're out in the field all the time, so they miss like half their calls. And even a really crude voice agent that could field inbound customer calls after hours or overflow when their other agents were on the phone was like a mind-blowing ROI to these small business owners. They were just like picking up dollars off the ground. And that was like just for me the first spark to see, wow, these can not just be as good as humans, but like they can provide superhuman capabilities. And I mean, at that time we're not anywhere near where we're going, but I think you can start to see that this is not just like an augmentation of humans, but if you can build superhuman voice agents in all sorts of different dimensions, like at some point when that becomes the norm, it's going to be a really big strategic differentiator. Like if you're used to 30% of the companies you call having like amazing voice agent that's like human sounding, remembers you, like can instantly understand your intent, not just your keywords. And then you call like your bank, who still has like an IVR from the 80s. Like that's just going to be a horrible experience for you, and it's going to look horrible on that bank. So I think like we're still so early in the adoption curve, but at some point everything's going to tip when you're like, I'm starting to have on a consistent basis these amazing customer experiences. And then I think like you've got all the laggards, the late majority, that's going to have to quickly come and embrace this in a big way. So that's what it felt like. There's a new platform, new interface being built.
You saw like
here.
real ROI, and you were like, oh wow, this is actually. And it was crazy to me too. Going from at the start, many of the applications that we saw, they were just like AI role play training for salespeople, or like these kind of things that were lower risk and also really hard to quantify the ROI of. But yeah, it started same thing that we noticed. Small business was one of the first, where it's like, okay, after hours, I'm answering a call, and now I'm making a sale or I'm booking an appointment that would not have happened.
Totally.
Otherwise.
Yeah. I think like the cost saving is one component of it, like voice AI on the phone versus staffing a human call center, which is both expensive it's like a terrible job to do. A lot of people would rather be doing something else. It's high turnover. But also, especially for small businesses, but even for enterprises, like voice AI is taking interactions that previously would have been unprofitable, like calling someone to activate a credit card or something, and making them profitable. Or for small businesses, they're booking way more appointments because they can pick up every call. Like, just so exciting.
Yeah, no, it's great. So, in terms of what you're seeing in the market now versus maybe like 2 years ago, what part looks like it's maturing the fastest in terms of layer of the stack or vertical, whatever pops out for you both?
I think the use case, we'll probably have similar answers on the use cases. Like there's a couple, customer support, obviously, appointment scheduling, some like lead qualification that I think are pretty quickly maturing.
Yeah. I think a bunch of the wedges have matured really quickly. So to your point, like basic reception, anything that's like better than a voicemail, after hours calls, those types of things. Some of the coaching and training stuff where before you would have had to pay a human being hundreds of dollars an hour, if not more, to come and sit alongside another human being and teach them how to do stuff, like that's starting to mature, which is really exciting. And then in some categories, home services is a great example where they just live or die by their ability to pick up the phone on time because you have an emergency with your air conditioner, you need it fixed that hour. We've gone from like 0 voice AI companies to probably 12 voice AI companies, all of which are, making millions of revenue or something within a year or less, which has been, just awesome to see.
Yeah, it's incredible. And as you look ahead, like where do you see is the biggest challenge or blocker that a lot of these companies are facing that either makes them die or like makes it so that their growth is slower than it could be?
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Go for it.
Okay. We talk about, as it's gotten easier to build a voice agent, which is a positive thing, those wedges that I were mentioning that are more mature, they're now easier for your competitors to do as well. So with a lot of our portfolio companies that are building in voice, we spend a lot of time thinking about like, what is your voice implementation and entry point for? Like maybe if you're a voice scribe, note-taking is becoming commoditized, and so what are you then doing with that data? How are you generating tasks or completing work or drafting email for people so that they'll kind of stick on your product versus something else? For voice agents, it still is hard to churn from an agent platform, especially if like, for a lot of our companies that sell voice agents into enterprises, they will kind of fine-tune a model based on all the call data. And so then to take the months of time and the thousands of hours of calls to replace that is like a little bit tricky. But it's not impossible, especially when the pricing can become a little bit of a race to the bottom. So a lot of times we think about like, what does voice lead into? Like maybe you want to be, some of these home services products might want to use a better AI receptionist as eventually a challenger to Service Titan by building a much broader system of record and a CRM and kind of other workflow software. Because if you think about it, for many businesses, like the phone call is upstream of almost everything else that happens in your business, front office or back office. So we think a lot about like, how do you expand from voice as a wedge into like a broader platform that includes voice and other modalities.
Yes, yeah. And you've seen that with, I assume, Happy Robot and
yes.
them? They're all kind of making this move to become the system of record.
A lot of our companies, if you like look at their website, maybe when we first funded them or before we funded them, it's like phone calls for X and AI phone calls for X industry. And then now it's like the agentic communication platform or the agentic, workflow platform for this industry.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it's just really close, like almost design partner work with customers, especially on the enterprise side, to figure out once we do phone calls well, what are the next few highest leverage things to do that are kind of adjacent to that.
Yeah. I totally agree on the long-term differentiation. And then I think the other reason in terms of like what makes one company succeed versus fail when as the barrier comes down to build these experiences that are like mind-blowing out of the box. I mean, one of the problems that I imagine we both see is like we see a lot of incredible demos. Like it is, it's not that hard to build like an unbelievable demo, but then like taking the demo from something that looks great in a constrained environment to enterprise grade or just real world reliability. Like not even talking about enterprise. It's just like your product now has to interface with the real world and all the like random chaos that involves. Like that's a lot of, it's like the last 5% or the last mile. It's just so much work. And so I think that's one of the things I know when we're meeting companies and trying to differentiate between the ones that look like they've got what it takes to succeed versus the others. It's like talking about all the like, we want to get into the minutia of like, what are all the little hard technical problems you had to solve that like seem tiny from the outside, but helped you get incrementally closer to that solving that last mile problem.
Yeah, and then we see this like, we have contracts that just like don't convert because we can't hit like 99.9 versus 99. Like that small gap is like so fucking hard to close. And it's always the silliest things. Like I often bring up the example of like addresses. Anytime you need to pick up an address over the phone, if you don't prime the transcription model with like every possible street, like then it's not gonna be able to pick up the term. So yeah, those are the gaps. So I guess, Olivia, I'd love to ask you, we did touch on enterprise a bit, but why do you think consumer adoption has lagged behind?
It's been a little bit slower, which is maybe surprising I don't know if people consider like Siri as a positive omen in this space or a negative omen at this point, but like, yeah, exactly. But you could say, hey, we had a mainstream, or even like Alexa, we had mainstream consumer voice AI interfaces for the last decade or so. Like, why hasn't it moved so quickly? I have a couple thoughts on this. I do think consumer voice AI is working in a couple areas. So one would be all of these high-cost services where typically you'd have to have another human perform them. So like, and they're kind of urgent with high willingness to pay. So like language learning is one category where we've seen several companies grow really fast. I would say, accent coaching or kind of cultural coaching is another big category where we've seen growth. Ed tech is another one, like even teaching your kid how to read or, learning how to do math, those kinds of things where it's easier to kind of talk it through out loud. The second category we've seen it working has been companions, because there are a lot of products building AI. Even if you look at, I think the usage of some of the XAI, as funny as they are, companions are voice driven and have gotten a lot of hours on them. But beyond those two use cases, there hasn't been as much. For me, it's like the B2B voice use case is so obvious because it's substituting in a lower cost human on the phone essentially, and you as a business can almost inflict the voice AI on your customer. And I say that positively because it's usually better than if they got a human, right? Yeah. But you as a business can decide, I'm going to have my customers interact with voice AI. Versus as a consumer, I have to say, this voice AI experience is so delightful to me and adds so much value to my life that I'm going to go seek it out as an independent product. And so having been a consumer investor for about a decade, it just always takes longer than we think and longer than we hope for like the creative builders and the creative ideas to emerge. And so I think most of the consumer voice AI things we've seen are skeuomorphic to like a language learning session or a therapy session done with a voice agent. But the ones that go mainstream will hopefully look like things I can't even predict because someone will come up with this genius new primitive or interface that we're all suddenly using that uniquely leverages voice.
Yeah, makes sense. And then I guess for you, Mike, like why do you think that on the enterprise side adoption has stalled? Or not stalled, but slower than it could be otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think enterprises also, to some extent, they're starting. Well, I'll give you two versions of this. One, like they're starting with the things that feel most natural, like we're replacing things where they were already using IVR or something else. The appointment scheduling and the customer support. And I think enterprises are, to some extent, are risk averse naturally. So I think part of this is like we just need better evals and tooling to make people feel comfortable putting this in front of customers. But on the flip side, I do think there are like bright spots that I'm also very surprised by. Like I look at we're fortunate to be investors in a company, Bridge, which is like a medical language transcription company or like an AI scribe, and I mean that's one of the most like mission critical use cases. It's transcribing a conversation between a doctor and a patient, and it's writing the doctor's note, and it's referencing billing codes. And they've kind of reached that threshold of reliability and performance to where they have many of the largest health systems in the country adopting it wildly. And so like I look at that, I'm like amazed that got healthcare, an industry that usually is takes so long to adopt this stuff, and is putting it like right in line.
Yeah.
And so I think transcription obviously is a little bit more mature than the end-to-end conversational agents, but I think that's a great leading indicator of what's to come for the conversational agents as they reach that level of maturity.
Yeah. I don't know if you've seen this. We see this a lot where, especially selling into enterprise, you'll start with one type of call, like a very simple one that you can execute really well. Because it's obvious to all of us, I think, that voice AI is exciting and working, but it's not obvious, understandably, to the person sitting in the Midwest running a mid-sized manufacturing business. Like, that's not what they spend all day on. Like, I would be terrible at their job too. I have no idea what's going on in their job either. And so a lot of our companies will start with like one type of call. They're kind of shock and awe them that it actually is amazing. And then they'll expand into like doing all those other types of calls, but it sometimes takes a while for the expansion to happen.
Yeah, but we see the same thing. Usually it starts with some sort of like simple transactional cost reduction use case, and it becomes revenue driving, and then ideally, like I talked about this morning in my speech, it becomes a one-to-one long-term relationship between enterprises and their businesses. And it's not just one workflow, but it's all the workflows put together. So now I want to take a strategic path to this conversation and start talking about, what you do for your jobs is figure out where value is going to accrue, right? So how do you think about the dynamic between the big labs like OpenAI and Anthropic and all these little startups trying to survive alongside the whale?
I mean, I'm happy to go first. I think I just expect the big labs to continue to pushing into more and more territory, at least particularly in all of the model components. But I think this is also a space that is so massive that I think there's unlimited opportunity for startups as well. Just as an aside, I actually think one of the big potential unknowns is will we see somebody release a really good open source speech-to-speech model? And I know there's work being done on that, but that could play a big role in just new business model potential for startups and could change the competitive dynamics with some of the big model providers. But I always think for startups, I just think the biggest opportunity is focusing on these last mile opportunities that the big labs are never going to get all the way down to. And so continuing to find, whether it's vertical specific or it's, continuing to find just little gaps in the tooling ecosystem that are not getting solved. These little, the market opportunity is so massive that by solving these little, what seem like little last mile opportunities, you can build something really big.
Yeah, I agree. I always get I know there's this meme whenever OpenAI has a developer day that this just killed, dozens of startups.
I think it's next week.
Okay, well, knock on wood or whatever. But I always get really excited and not scared, especially for our application layer companies building in voice AI, because exactly to your point, what I've noticed is the model companies are amazing at models, and they're not as great at other UI. Maybe the recent Sora app was somewhat of an exception. It has some buzz. But I don't think that OpenAI, for example, and they hypothetically could have done this already, has come out with their own great, build your own customer support bot, interface. And so for the most part, what we've seen our companies do is just be able to leverage all of the advantages on the model side and use them to make their products much better. Because, as you said, 90% of the value comes from the last 10% of how do you, OpenAI is not going to tune their voice model for logistics or healthcare or a specific industry. They're not going to go integrate with all of the PMS systems, TMS, whatever practice management system that you have in the different vertical. They're not going to go do the really difficult go-to-market for these customers that are extremely kind of diverse and spread throughout the world. And so I'm more positive on kind of model layer developments. They'll capture a lot of their own value, but they also leave a ton of value, I think, for people building more focused applications.
Yeah, so that's the application layer, and we talked a bit about the model layer, but I'd love to know just that messy middle, and also the model layer, how do you think about value accruing there versus what gets commodified? If you could help break it down.
I think this is, when we talk about the just the amount of value creation opportunity, like obviously it's so big that there'll be some at every layer. Because the alternative to building to buying one of these tools off the shelf is massive amounts of engineering still. And so I think there will always be companies that do that themselves if it's their core business, but there's still going to be, just like we've seen with every other developer platform business, there is going to be a large market for abstracting away the complexity of all this engineering that is, if it's not your core business, you'd rather pay somebody else to maintain it and build it for you. So I think there's going to be still plenty of value creation in that middle category. I have no questions about the total size of the pie. I think there's always a question in each of these categories in terms of like how much value can companies capture. Some of that comes down to just like how competitive is the ecosystem. Yeah. And that's, this is one of the fastest growing, biggest markets that we've seen in a long time. And as a result, there's a lot of competition. And so I think that's also something that I'm sure everyone's aware of here. And, that's why velocity matters as much as it ever has in almost all of these AI categories that we're investing in, to be able to stay a step ahead of the competition and really try to capture as much of that emerging pie as possible.
Yeah, competition is crazy. I don't think I've ever seen, I mean, you both would know, but like I've been told that this market looks really weird because everybody's simultaneously customers of each other, vendors of each other, and competing with each other all at the same time.
Yeah. This conference is a good example.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got like all sorts of companies here that
our
overlap.
sponsors, friends, foes, leverage. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the good thing though is like everyone agrees we're so early in what is going to be this massive opportunity. Like there's plenty of pie to go around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I fully agree. If you think about the whole market it's every phone call that's made, but it's also even beyond that, like a lot of these coaching interactions, teaching interactions, like anything where a person might be talking, and even if they're talking to another person or not, if that is the size of the market, there's going to be like tons of value to be accrued at like every level of the stack, I think.
Yeah, great. So Olivia, I'd love to ask you, like, where do you think consumer adoption is headed looking forward?
Yeah.
I'd love to know, like, one, the perspective you have maybe from the big tech players, and then also maybe just on the startups.
Yeah. I think the big tech players have been a little bit slower in voice than we would have anticipated, which is good for startups probably. OpenAI's advanced voice mode was pretty significantly nerfed, I believe, in order to make it, after they had all the drama when they were first released around the her use case and all of that. And so I think that's a good user experience, but there's still room for like massively different, more focused, more engaging consumer AI experiences. Also, I think OpenAI is really good at executing on things within the ChatGPT app, but they have not yet proven that they can build their own interfaces really outside of that. I think there'll be a lot of consumer voice experiences that live like in your AirPod or maybe on a pendant or in glasses or all of these other kind of modalities and ways of communicating that are going to feel a lot more ambient and natural than just sitting around and talking to a phone. I always say, having done consumer for a while, like if I knew what the next big consumer thing was, I would go build it versus trying to predict or invest in it. Because the biggest consumer companies are like $50 billion businesses. So consumer largely can be, in my view, more observed than predicted. But I will say that it feels like almost all of the consumer AI experiences, voice included, are kind of like text box UI right now, or maybe floating bubble UI right now. And like we will have voice companions that live like on your screen, in your ear, in your spreadsheet, like anywhere where it's easier for you to kind of communicate information out loud versus via text, which is like so many examples.
I'm curious to ask, and this is kind of out of left field, but OpenAI's like hardware device that they're rumored to be working on. I'm just curious, like your thoughts on that. Do you think that like something like that could take on the iPhone, like that it actually could work, and a company like that can distribute to everybody the same way?
I think it could happen. I think again, it's almost similar to kind of what we were talking about before, where I would not be surprised if like OpenAI, Meta, Google Apple even does a really good job with the hardware devices that can deliver the end applications. But I don't think that they're necessarily going to build the best best-in-class end applications themselves.
Yeah.
And so if there is a new platform like AirPods, for example, I think there's going to be a lot of room for people to build things that kind of take advantage of those versus OpenAI owns everything that runs on its own hardware device, is what I would guess. But it's yet to be seen, I would say.
Yeah. It's interesting. Johnny Ive.
I know.
A big deal. It's a big deal. So, Michael, I'm curious to ask you, because you probably see a lot of voice AI companies, a lot of AI companies more generally, losing a lot of money.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Kind of, we don't look. We don't know how much are those tokens. But yeah, how do you think about margins in a market like this, where it's like $1 in, it's like $2 out for some of these companies like Cursor. So yeah, would love to know.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that I think gets asked all the time, particularly in the market that we're in right now. The very simple, almost academic answer is margins ultimately matter a lot. That every business ultimately gets valued on its future free cash flow, which you got to have some gross margins to generate any cash. But at the same time, certainly in these early stage markets where things are growing incredibly quickly and winning market share really matters. I think for a lot of our businesses, you want to be probably focused on gaining market share and growing, as quickly as possible within some framework of how we're going to achieve the margins long term. This is a double-edged sword, because I think people will reference a Snowflake was famously gross margin negative for a really long time. Now they have great margins and a great business. Yeah, many great infrastructure companies went through this journey, which I think can also be an excuse for why we don't need to worry about margins, because we're Snowflake and we'll figure out margins later. So I think you need to be really thoughtful about it, and I think most businesses that pull off this gross margin walk over time, they're thinking about it and battling for pennies, even at the early days. Even if maybe they're consciously deciding we're going to discount on price or something to gain market share, the engineering team constantly needs to be thinking about how do we optimize our margins despite the price that we're selling at today, or despite the cost of our infrastructure, our models, given our scale. And because I think it's just there's some of the simplest levers to just improve the fundamentals of your business are can we raise the unit price or the unit margin? There's nothing that improves the fundamentals faster than just getting paid more for what you're doing.
Yeah.
So
And I'm curious, I'll pose you a hypothetical. Let's say a startup founder, they have not great margins, and you ask him what's your plan? And he's like, oh, model costs are coming down. How do you think about that? Is that enough?
You know what? They're not wrong, right? It's I think in a lot of cases we'd say, yeah, model costs are coming down, and you can pretty reliably bet on that. I still would, but I also think model costs are coming down, but we're going to use a lot more of those tokens because they're coming down. People are going to expect a lot more, so it doesn't necessarily mean that your margins are going to massively improve. People consistently want the best models too, so I still would be pushing on yes, that should be part of the plan, but we also need to have a really thought. I think we also want to see that the founders care, not just that they have a plan, but I really want to have good margins at some point. I'm making an intentional decision today to sacrifice them, but I really care that long term we're going to be able to build some sustainable margin business.
It's so interesting. I feel like pricing is still such an open question within voice AI. So many of our companies in the early days of voice AI, and some of them still do, would just charge per minute, which I think is fine. And again, it benefits you as model costs are coming down. But we started running into this issue where the customers are actually somewhat sophisticated, either because they understand that or because they're getting sold by competitors who explain it to them and who are willing to undercut you on price. And so what we've seen a lot of our companies, especially selling voice AI into enterprises, do, this is why it benefits you to have a broader platform that's not just the voice agent, because then you can have some component of your pricing that is usage indexed on the voice agent, but also a platform fee and a SaaS fee and forward deployed engineering fee and all of these other things that go into the contract that it's harder for someone else to come in and say, oh, they're offering you 15 cents a minute, I'll do it for 10 cents a minute or something.
Totally.
Got it. And actually, I'd love to ask you, Olivia, because I know making money in consumer is hard. And making money with voice AI in consumer is extremely hard.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, do you have like a higher level of scrutiny with like voice AI consumer startups more generally, given the costs are so crazy?
It's an interesting question. I think making money in consumer used to be harder than it is. It's still hard.
Okay.
But what we used to see in consumer was you would build a great business, it would be free, your product would be free. You would hopefully hit tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of users, and then you would like pray that you could monetize them effectively via ads, which has worked for a lot of businesses, some better than others, like historically over the years. Now, I would say, like, I pull a lot of our data on kind of the top usage consumer AI applications, and the vast majority of them are now monetizing directly from consumers for the first time via subscription or something like that. So it makes it a little bit easier. That being said, like, you're still going to have your whales in usage where you're extremely unprofitable on them as a customer, and so you kind of have to decide how much you're going to sacrifice in margin in order to gain mind share. Because if you charge too much as a consumer product too, it really kind of limits expansion. And so I think we look for cases where, as a consumer business, like, you're probably not going to have the 70-80% margins of like an enterprise SaaS company, but hopefully you're also not losing like a massive amount per user, and there's some path there.
And one thing in particular is doing like the freemium model, like within consumer voice AI. It's like almost impossible. Like, I think, I won't say how much we spend just on our website. Our website like has a voice agent you can talk to on the website. It's like $10K a week or something. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like just to show this demo, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, I don't feel great for the users who have to show people the product before they try it. So I'd love to ask you guys, what's like one prediction that you have about the future, the market, what will happen that you think most people here would disagree with? Any spicy takes?
My spicy take outside of this room is always like, in 2 years, you're going to prefer to talk to a voice agent, but I think everyone here probably agrees with that. And maybe people agree with this, I have no idea. I think certainly when we met our first, a year ago, when we invested in Vapi, we talked to lots of researchers, and there was like a consensus that like the whole world is going speech to speech, like next week. Like, it was very clear, like that's like this whole cascading architecture is old news, and that was something we thought a lot about. And I think it's just been really interesting to watch how that has. I mean, certainly there's like amazing capabilities and benefits of having the full duplex speech-to-speech models. But I think at least in like the enterprise B2B applications that we spend a lot of time in, like, to me, it doesn't feel like we're going to, see massive near-term adoption of speech-to-speech, just given the trade-off in cost and lack of control, and like how pretty good you can build a cascaded system today. So maybe that's I don't know how hot that is, but that's my take.
Yeah.
I have maybe a lukewarm one, and then maybe a more controversial one. My lukewarm one, which I think a lot of people here would probably agree with, is I think for a while, and this comes from a mistake I made in like mid 2024, I was like, are these models ever going to get good enough to even do basic conversations on the phone for real enterprises? And now that has happened, I worry much less about the leap that needs to be made to do like, okay, what's it going to take to do a complex or emotional or really charged or high stakes, like AI being a really good salesperson on the phone. Like, I am now a believer that the model advancements are coming that are going to make that happen, and it's probably going to come faster than we think. So that's one. The second one is, I think SMB software has historically been a tricky category. You guys have done a great job investing in SMB software, but it's hard. Like, you can kind of count on one or two half of a second hand, like how many really, really big SMB software businesses there have been. I think the interesting thing about SMBs is they spend not that much on software, but they spend a lot proportionally on labor. And so if you think about AI voice as being able to cut into the labor spend, whether it's like receptionists, back office ordering, managing reviews, doing marketing, all of that, I can absolutely envision a world where an SMB today in 2025 might be spending $500 on software, and in 5 years, maybe they're spending $10,000, $20,000 on software because it's doing the job of a human before. And not to say there won't be humans at these SMBs, but they'll be able to do the things that actually require a human being versus the things that LLMs can do now. So I'm spending a lot of my time around voice AI for SMBs, I would say.
Yeah, it seems to be working out well. Yeah, Service Titan.
Yeah.
So that's actually all the questions that I have here, but I'd love to open it up to the audience if you guys have any questions. We can field them. Yeah, I'd like to start with you.
Kind of comparing it with the...
Oh, would you mind speaking up a little bit?
Sorry, okay.
Yeah.
Kind of comparing it with the million-year-old brick and mortar banking disrupted with embedded finance. Do you see voice as a standalone for longer term, or voice becoming embedded part of applications and infrastructure in that sense that it's no longer a standalone disruptive thing, more like a big bang leading to a big crunch, making it part of the thing in a faster pace? As an investor, do you see that as a good thing? Because that big crunch could lead to a consolidation and a bigger valuation for the portfolio companies?
Yeah.
Just to repeat the question, I think you were asking, like, is voice going to be, we're going to see standalone voice companies versus voice as a component of every business?
Correct. Being part of the multimodality. It's just one of the senses that people can interface with. Voice, text, video, maybe in the future.
Yeah, I think we'll see both. I think we'll see, like, certainly we're big believers that every business is going to have a voice component, but I'm also, like, so interested in businesses that weren't possible before and are now, like, we can suddenly have this, like, infinitely cheap ability to conduct phone calls. Like, I think we're, like any platform shift, we're just starting to see examples of what could you do that none of us have thought about, because it's, like, so ingrained in our heads that phone calls are expensive because you have humans involved. And I have one anecdote of a very early stage company that I met recently that's conducting expert network calls with voice agents, which are, like, investors like us do lots of expert network calls. Like, they had a public company customer. Their corp dev team was trying to buy a small business, and over the course of a weekend, they needed to get smart on this market. And so they went to this startup and they conducted 100 expert network calls in 24 hours, which would have been, like, impossible. Like, I spend many hours of my day, like, talking to experts one-on-one. And so they deployed these agents, they conducted hundreds of calls, they summarized all the findings, and, like, the team came back in on a Monday and was like, great, now I know everything about this market. And that's, like, it's just these really interesting use cases of how do you deploy these agents in ways that was totally possible before. So I think I think we'll see more of these, like, net new companies created that are just do, like, a voice thing in addition to all the voice applications.
Totally agree. Yeah. I think especially on the consumer side, like, we're already seeing voice mode being baked into so much, whether it's transcription or agent to agent or voice to voice. But the reason in consumer you see, like, this step function growth where a platform shift happens and suddenly a huge new wave of big consumer companies, and then it's flat for a little while, and then, like, a mobile platform shift, the internet, like, and I think AI voice is another one of those where there are so many ideas that maybe have been percolating for a while that the product was just not possible to build in a delightful way before we had AI voice. And so we'll see a lot more of those. But I do think we'll see it embedded on the B2B side. I think that if you want to build a challenger to a big business, like home services is another one, like if you want to disrupt Service Titan or something, starting with voice AI as a wedge is a pretty good place to start, just because then you own much of the relevant data on the business and you control the relationship with the customer and all of that. So I agree with you. I think we'll see both of those things happen.
Would you like to go ahead?
I want to piggyback on his question. Picture yourself as a financial services company in Southern Arizona that wants to embrace voice AI. But their apprehension is data governance.
Yeah.
And what guardrails do we have? I mean, a client calls, gives their confidential information.
Yeah.
ID, social, we all know that. So how do we encourage these credit unions, but at the same time ensure that we have proper guardrails in place?
Yeah.
We don't have these data leaking.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably a good one for me.
I was going to say, do you want to?
Yeah.
Happy to.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Yeah, I mean,
Going to repeat that for people.
yeah, so the short answer is, or no, short question. The question is, in these more sensitive industries, think like healthcare or finance, and you're talking about more sensitive data over the phone, think like your social insurance number or your like credit card number or whatever, how do you actually ensure that it's going to be safe? And this is like, anytime we go into an enterprise conversation, it's like one of the two things we always have to cover. They almost always start with, we want it on-prem. And we're like, oh boy, that's a lot. That's a lot of work. And honestly, that would be the easiest way if deploying these models and these orchestrator systems on-prem was easy. But the problem is these orchestrator systems have like 12 external dependencies and all these different model providers and stuff. So deploying that in someone's cloud is actually really hard. So we try to make it so that we host it. And then to assuage their concerns, obviously you can get compliant. So you can actually get PCI compliant, HIPAA compliant, SOC 2 compliant. It helps. But what we actually invested in early on, it was kind of a little hack, but it ended up working out great, was we created this transient mode where actually we don't store any data at all. And so we can act as this transient pass-through layer where the call lives in memory with the worker, and then as the worker dies, all the data dies with the worker, and we throw it to them via a webhook. So by doing that, we've been able to get around some of the hesitations, but ultimately, with the big enterprise, we will need to see more on-prem deployments and those sort of concessions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
Oh, one more question? Yeah, go ahead.
Hopefully it's good. So open source has really been lagging in voice. A little anecdote. So I have a project that I'm working on, and it's in the video space, and I'm using all open source models except for voice right now. And voice doubled the cost of my project. That includes live real-time video. So why do you guys think that open source is lagging, and do you see signs that it will catch up soon?
Great question. Yeah, did everyone heard that? I think, yeah. All right, go ahead.
I'm happy to maybe
Yeah.
start. I think it's an interesting one. I think it's partially where the data and the researchers live that are working on open source projects. Like I think in video and other categories, we've seen some things come out of China or other markets where it's cheaper and easier to maybe get data that is or is not copyright protected, but you can still train a model on it if you're training it in the place that you're training it. I think voice is especially tricky given like the quality and the volume of the data that you have to get. And there's not like a YouTube for voice anywhere where you can right now, other than that you can kind of easily scrape the exact kind of thing that you're looking for. So I would imagine that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I might also, this is just my hypothesis, is that like the open source models in some ways on the tech side like lagged a little bit of seeing like the amazing, mind-blowing experiences of the proprietary models. And so to some extent it may just be, there was a lot going on the last couple of years and this was not a priority until I hope, I know some of the folks working on this at Meta and that they're, I've heard NVIDIA's got a team that may be working on something like this. Like I'm hopeful that we'll see more and more of this because I think there's massive potential, particularly for even like to combine small models in certain parts of the conversation that are very routine to bring down the cost dramatically. And I think it'll, as I said earlier, I think it'll create a lot of opportunities for startups if we have a better open source model ecosystem. It'll make it much easier to use these things dramatically more as the cost comes down. So I don't know if you know anything more about.
I think also, when it comes to audio, data is hard to find. It's not as free and open as the internet finding text. And so that's why even for, I know DeepGram, they have their own labeler team because it's so hard to get like good label transcription data. And if you can imagine speech to speech, how are we going to get the data to like train the model to like inflect in a certain way? Like it's like, how the fuck do you label that? Like it's really, it's weird. And so, I mean, we're very hopeful that some of the techniques that DeepGram was talking about today, like taking the 1 point, splitting it into vector space, that kind of stuff is like right on the forefront, but it's still really early.
Yeah, a lot of our companies will do crazy things to get good voice data. Like I've heard of pitches recently of companies that are buying voice memo data like off of WhatsApp. Like they'll pay a consumer to install an app that allows you to take their voice memos from WhatsApp and use it to train a model. So I'm not an infrastructure person, but to my understanding, for some reason, the quantity and quality of data that you have to get to train these models is just been a little bit trickier in voice.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for coming out to the panel. Thank you to our two panelists for their time.
Thank you.